يكون من نجوى ثلاثة إلا هو رابعهم ولا خمسة إلا هو سادسهم ولا أدنى من ذلك ولا أكثر إلا هو معهم أينما كانوا ثم ينبئهم بما عملوا يوم القيامة إن الله بكل شيء عليم. ألم تر إلى الذين نهوا عن النجوى ثم يعودون لما نهوا عنه ويتناجون بالإثم والعدوان ومعصية الرسول وإذا جاءوك حيوك بما لم يحيك به الله ويقولون في أنفسهم لولا يعذبنا الله بما نقول حسبهم جهنم يصلونها فبئس المصير. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا تناجيتم فلا تتناجوا بالإثم والعدوان ومعصية الرسول وتناجوا بالبر والتقوى واتقوا الله الذي إليه تحشرون. إنما النجوى من الشيطان ليحزن الذين آمنوا وليس بضارهم شيئا إلا بإذن الله وعلى الله فليتوكل المؤمنون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا قيل لكم تفسحوا في المجالس فافسحوا يفسح الله لكم وإذا قيل انشزوا فانشزوا يرفع الله الذين آمنوا منكم والذين أوتوا العلم درجات والله بما تعملون خبير. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بفضل الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله والحمد حقه كما يستحقه حمدا كثيرا. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. اللهم لعن أول ظالم ظلم حق محمد وآل محمد وآخر تابع له على ذلك. اللهم لعن العصابة التي جاهدت الحسين وشايعت وبايعت وتابعت على قتله. اللهم لعنهم جميعا. ثم الصلاة والسلام على خير خلق الله أجمعين محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين، واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. Tonight's discussion will revolve around the issue of tijara. And by definition, when we look at tijara, some of the definition of tijara, the meaning they say is bida'a. Bida'a meaning goods or merchandise or property or any commodity. However, that's not what we're looking at in the term of tijara. The tijara we're looking at is the actual mutajara, which is the actual action, the exchange or distribution of goods. It's the business, it's the commerce, it's the trade, it's the transaction or the act of transacting, dealings and deals. It's the process of making a transaction. And this is very important because trade or business is an important part of our lives. Why is it important? Because it allows us to focus on what's necessary. How? Could you imagine you didn't have any form of trade? You need to build a house. Firstly, you need the what? Equipment. You need to go learn how to make tools. You need to know how to extract iron from its ore. You need to know how to make an alloy. So firstly, you got to be what? Someone that understands metals, to be a geologist to begin with. From one thing to another, how many different majors and degrees would you have to have? It would be what? Impossible. That's why we'd go back to what? The origins of civilization, as we call it the Stone Age, or they call it when they had cavemen, and these times where people used to make do with what they had. And if you want to see a good example of this, there's an island that's off India, off the shore. There's an island that still exists that is exactly like this. It is an actual law, Indian law, that no one can go onto this island. These people are still living like they would have been living 30,000 years ago. And this is how you'd have to live. So imagine no one had a trade and we all did things ourselves, then we wouldn't advance. This is the importance of having a trade. We'd be preoccupied in learning everything. We'd be jacks of all trade, as they say, but masters of nothing. And this is why there's so much importance on commodities. You know, in school, when you're doing commerce, what do you learn? You learn about goods and services. Goods, things that you purchase. Services are things you pay for people to do for you. Goods are usually a tangible thing, and the service is something that is, or as it says, a service, someone does it for you. For example, a good is something you buy from a supermarket, and a service is when you get a panel beater to fix your car. Okay, but what is the basis of doing trade? In general, it's to make a profit and avoid making a loss. This is why we do it as well. The reason why we do it is because of its necessity, but why we actually do it, because there's some gain or a profit. Now let's take a look at what Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam says about trade. It's narrated that he says, تعرضوا للتجارة. In other words, تعرضوا للتجارة, for you to practice various trades. For you to, each person that you notice when you look for a careers advisor, they tell you where there's a deficiency. Go do this trade. Or for example, sometimes when they're getting skilled migration, they look for where they are lacking. They even look ahead. So I look for practice various trades. He says, فَإِنَّ لَكُمْ فِيهَا فَإِنَّا لَكُمْ فِيهَا, you'll find therein, from doing trades, he mentions one thing of utmost importance. He says, غِنًى عَمَّا فِي أَيْدِي النَّاسِ وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْتَرَفَ الْأَمِينَ. The first thing that he mentions is that trade does what? Work, basically, business. It gives you what? It says ghinan. When we say ghinan, it makes you needless of what? Amma fi aydin nas. In other words, if you work, you don't need to beg. If you're working, I don't need to ask for people. I don't have to be one of those gaddis. Some people that sit down and just sit on the side of the road, can you spare $1? You're not supposed, because when you do that, what do people, honestly, when they see, you see someone begging, where do you see them in your spectrum? Like if you had a list of people, where you have all the top people in society, and at the bottom you have I don't want to say, people that work in certain jobs, I don't want to say if some people might get offended, all the way to what? To someone that begs. This is where you align them. No one ever says, Wallah, this guy is Fulan, he's the son of a shahad. Barakallah fi, he's the son of a beggar. No, it's something that's not looked upon. It's something that's scorned. It's something that's detestable. Even to the point where one man was living in poverty and he was in need, and his wife said to him, go to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alayhi. She said, go to Rasulullah and ask him for money. So he went to the Prophet. The Prophet was surrounded by his companions. As he got closer and he was within ear's length, where he could actually hear, where the Imam, I want to say is hearing length, where he could actually hear the Prophet, he heard the Prophet say, Man sa'alana fa'a'taynah wa man istaghna aghnahu Allah. This is something very important. He says, whoever asks us, we will give them. But whoever refrains from asking us, Allah will give them wealth. Aghna, Allah will make them leaders. They won't need. See, sometimes people might question the point here. They go, hold on, but when we go to the shrines, we ask. You're not asking from, and in fact, this is the wrong belief. There are people that will say things like, and I've seen people, they'll come up to the shrine of Imam al-Rida and say, listen, if you don't give me, I'm going to go complain to your grandfather, Imam Ali. It's ludicrous. You're totally cutting out God. And when people have these kind of beliefs, this is what causes people to think someone's a mughali. And this is where the shirk gets involved. Where someone absolutely cuts them out. It's as if that's a God and that's a God. That's what they are. Like we read dua tawassul, ya wajihan and Allah. Ishfa' lana and Allah. This is the meaning. That you are the face of God. You are the direction I turn to God from. Do you understand what I mean? So when you're coming to the Prophet and asking or begging, so I say, the way that you're supposed to do it is say, oh Ya Rasulullah, ask Allah, do dua for me because your dua is answered. Oh Ya Rasulullah, from you, Allah answers your prayers. But to ask and to beg is something that's not good. So he says, whoever asks us, we'll give them. Whoever refrains, Allah will increase them. So he leaves. The next day his wife said, listen, it's very bad. Go back to the Prophet. So he goes to the Prophet, and as he gets closer, he hears the Prophet say it again. Man sa'alana fa'ataynah wa man istaghna aghnahu Allah. Whoever asks us, we will give them. But whoever refrains, Allah will increase them. Allah will make them needless. He refrains, on the third day the same thing happens. As he returns, he says, I can't go back home. What's my wife going to think? So he goes to his neighbor. He asks, do you have any tool that I may borrow? And the neighbor says, I have this axe. He says, let me borrow the axe off you. He takes the axe on a loan from him. And then he goes into the woods, chops up some timber, brings it back and sells it in the marketplace. And then he begins to do it until he has wealth from selling timber. Then he returns the axe to his neighbor and he purchases his own axe. This is the way it works. So when the narration says he returns to the Prophet and he tells him what happened, the Prophet said, how do you find the wealth that you have earned from the sweat of your brow? He says, Ya Rasulullah, it has a flavor to it. See, when someone, if you've seen drug dealers, why do you think drug dealers will buy Gucci underwear? It didn't work hard. People that earn a dirty dollar, they don't work hard. They don't care. They don't weigh what they're spending their money on. That's why they'll buy dumb things. That's why they'll buy you ever seen, you go to the Khalij, you see they've got these cufflinks, sometimes with diamonds on them. And you go, what the hell? He's got diamonds on his cuffs. No one's ever going to see them. You know what I mean? It's like when I always make fun of diamond rings. I know women get upset with this. I go, you could always get a CZ. No one know the difference. Who knows? Who he can tell the difference between a cubic zirconia and a diamond? No diamond thieves here. Alhamdulillah. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Because begging is unmanly, it's un-Islamic, and it's unethical. The second thing that he says, وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, says certainly, indeed, Allah Azza wa Jal yuhibbul muhtaraf al-amin. Generally, when we talk about someone's muhtaraf, we're talking about someone that has a professional in this narration, a profession. Someone that does something that's amin. What it means is they are dependable. What does that mean, they're dependable? They do their work honestly. When they do a job, they do it properly. Okay? They don't cheat people. They do it properly and they charge fairly. Not they walk in and they say, all right, this customer looks like they have no idea what's going on. I'm going to overcharge him for this. No. And especially if you're in one of those jobs. Those jobs where people don't know the pricing. Well, the pricing can range from $100 to $500. And you know what it really costs you. And you decide, I'm going to slug. So you're not a muhtarif amin. Allah loves the dependable worker. Hello, what we're going to look at is the etiquette of making profit. Okay, according to the teachings of Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam. Because I need to know the ins and outs of business. I need to know the ins and outs of everything. In fact, yajib, you know what yajib means? It's an obligation on everyone to know their day-to-day teachings. When you find your books of Islamic law for your marja, you have all these new age people that go, I don't do taqleed. Yes, you do. Whether you like it or not, you do taqleed. You don't do taqleed of a alim. You do taqleed of a jahil, like your father. I'm not saying anyone's father is a jahil, but that's who they follow. They follow the actual father. But you do the taqleed of a jahil or someone down the road. Like I remember one guy, he goes, I don't believe in hummus. I don't pay hummus. So I said to him, all right, but there is a ruling for hummus. He said, yes. I said, so how do you pay it? He said, we pay it to a sheikh and he buries it for Imam Mehdi. And I go, which sheikh? The one driving the Bentley or the Rolls Royce? What are you talking about? So he grabs it and he just buries it in the backyard and you believe him? What, you think these private jets that they have just appear out of the sky? They spontaneously appear out of the sky? You're still giving it to someone that's a human. This is why the system's there. But when I open the book of Islamic laws, there are rulings. It is obligatory on each one of you to know. If I was to say to anyone here, stand up and perform wudu, and ask you questions on wudu, you have to know the answer. It's not mustahab, it's wajib. To know the rulings of prayers, it's wajib. To know the ruling of fasting in Shahr Ramadan, is it wajib for you to know the rulings of Hajj? No. Why? It's not an amr that you're mubtala. It's not something that you do every second. If I asked you to know the rulings of sayd, of hunting, is it wajib on you to know it? No. But things that you're about to undertake. If I'm going on a hunting trip, is it wajib on me to learn the rules of hunting before I go? Yes. For me to get involved in any profession, I have to know what the ins and outs of that profession are. You have people, I remember one man, I was at home I was probably about 15 years old at the time. This man walked in and said to my father, I pray qada every day. I don't pray dhuhr and asr. Sorry, maghrib and isha, I pray them qada when I get home. And my father said, why don't you pray at work? He said, because I'm nijis. He said, what do you do that you're nijis? He said, I'm a bartender. So all the alcohol makes my clothes nijis. So to begin with, the guy had no idea what he was doing is haram. But his clothes were nijis. He knew that ruling at least. And only a fool undertakes a task without any knowledge. You know those guys that always say, I know. Whatever you tell me is about it. Yeah, I know. And whenever you're about, they always know everything. Whatever you try and tell them, and they always, when you ask a job, is this job, can you do it in 3 weeks? They go, yeah. They always agree to any time frame. They always agree to any conditions. And when the job's done, they never do it the way you've asked to. Do you know the problem with this? Is that money that they earn that they think is permissible can be sahat. You know what sahat is? Sahat is like, just to give you an idea, what do you think of someone that has drug money? Drug money is called sahat. Earning money like this is also called sahat. Sahat money is unlawful money. It's money that's not permissible. It's money that you eat that turns into fire, that manifests on the day of judgment into fire. So while you are dead, your belly burns until the day of judgment because you've been consuming haram. Is it now important for me to pay attention? Is it now important for me to understand? Remember that joke where they said Microsoft wanted to employ a person. They said this person has to have this degree and that degree and that degree. And he has to have a two doctorates and this and that. And they said they ended up getting 300 people to apply. They said, all right, there's too many people. Out of these 300 people, we need someone that knows how to decode in several of the software languages. So it got down to about 50 people. And then they kept asking questions. Finally, they said, there was about 4 or 5 people left. They go, we need someone that can speak Czechoslovakian. After all this, and then 2 people were left. And so then they said, all right, speak Czechoslovakian with each other. So one of them looked at the other one. He goes, Shoo inti Lebanese. So the other one said, oh, you're Lebanese, inti Lebanese. In other words, it's a joke that sometimes people have this attitude that you can wing it all the way. So you asked him, are you Lebanese? He said, are you Lebanese? They weren't even speaking Czechoslovakian, but they wing it. You've seen those people, they wing it all their lives. They wing it through everything. There's people that, there's people in university who plagiarize the whole way. They don't know anything. They somehow get to, when they have to do their profession, they've got no idea. They have no idea about what they're doing. So anyway, let's take a look what it is that I need to know. Firstly, Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam says, Man arada tijara, whoever wants to get into a trade or into business, any form of transaction, what? He says, فَلْيَتَفَقَّهْ فِي دِينِهِ. Sometimes you hear that saying, التاجر فاجر حتى يتفقه في الدين. That's not a hadith. That's something it's a murakkab people have put together. These are the actual narrations. He says, Man arada tijara falyatafaqah fi dinih. Whoever wants to do any form of trade, let them know their religious duties. Like I mentioned, لِيَعْلَمْ بِذَلِكَ. Why do I need to know them? مَا يَحِلُّ لَهُ مِمَّا يَحْرُمُ وَمَنْ لَمْ يَتَفَقَّهْ فِي دِينِهِ ثُمَّ تَجَرَى تَوَرَّةَ الشُّبُهَاتِ. That if I need to know my religious duties in what I'm going to work with, so I know what's permissible and I know what's not permissible. For example, people in the medical industry. You want to become and just study medicine. There are a lot of things you need to understand. One of the things like, I get asked questions. I got asked a question once 15 years ago. I freaked out this question. I had a friend, he told me, I'm working, he's a doctor, he said, I'm working in the geriatric ward. And this is in the UK, not in Australia. He said, we have patients that says DNR, do not resuscitate. What is the ruling there? He's asking these things. You need to know these things. What is my obligation here when I'm told not to resuscitate someone if they're going to die? What's my duty as a Muslim? I need to know any obligation I'm about to enter, what are my rulings? What is the ruling that is there? Because I need to know what is permissible and I need to know what is forbidden. And if I do not know, Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam says, تَوَرَّةَ بِالشُّبُهَاتِ. That what happens, you are entangled into uncertainties. The problem is uncertainties. I'm not sure what's permissible and I'm not sure what is not. So the question is, how do I make a correct transaction? How do I go into business correctly? How do I go into any form of trade correctly? We look at the hadith on Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. He says, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he says, من باع واشترى فليجتنب خمس خصال. If you are to sell, buy, or اشترى, or to buy. If you are to sell or buy, any form of transactional trade, he says, let them what? Avoid 5 habits. 5 things they have to avoid. Write this down, put this in your head. I'm going to go into trade, 5 things I have to avoid. He says, وَإِلَّا, if not, فَلَا يَبِيعَنَّ وَلَا يَشْتَرِيَنَّ. Notice what he's saying here. This is the importance of Arabic. If he does not meet with these, فَلَا يَبِيعَنَّ. There's a noon tawqid thaqil. That there's a certainty here. Do not buy, do not sell if you don't follow these 5 conditions. Because you're going to get yourself. You know, it's like when you give someone directions, even though you don't know the way. You're going to put them into, you're going to destroy. It's like, for example, saying, like, you say, I'm going to give someone CPR and you don't even know what you're doing. You know, like if someone has a car accident, what do they tell you? You know, if it's a spinal injury, you don't know what you're doing. You could move this person and give them something, make it even worse. I need to know what I'm going to do before I act. You're better off not acting if you don't know what you're doing. So, what are they? The first one he says, and I'll go over each one. The first one he says, al-riba. Al-riba. If you look in Allah Azza wa Jal says in the Quran, وَأَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعَ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَى. Allah permits bay', form of trade, or selling, buying and selling. Bay' meaning selling, but وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَى. Allah has forbade usury. What's usury? You hear this word all the time. Riba. Riba has a lot of rulings. This is something you need. See, sometimes you tell people a ruling of riba. Like, I'll give you an example that you say it to people they don't even know. Say, for example, I give someone a kilo of medium grain rice and they give me 1.5 kilos of basmati rice. Is that a halal transaction or haram transaction? It's haram because that's riba. Because I'm giving him rice, he's returning more rice. That's riba. 2 types, same type thing, they have to be given in return. So in other words, even with gold, this is a big problem. I could trade a 0.5 kilo of gold, say for 400 grams. This is a riba transaction. I need to know what I'm doing before I do this. People ask, because this is important, people always ask, okay, what's the case with bank loans? You always ask this. But okay, how is it permissible for me to buy a house and pay interest? And first thing you need to understand, it is not permissible to make a loan with interest. There are secondary laws, just like, I'll give you a good example. Okay, here's a good example. Let's say the ruling for doing an autopsy on a body. Is it permissible for me to allow someone to use my body for an autopsy? Say, for example, they need to do tashreeh on my body to understand how, for example, once again, I'm using medical examples, with the case of a cadaver. When they get a cadaver, this is which is a corpse that the medical students use to study with, to understand the human body. They use this for research. Is it permissible for me to donate my body into research? No, it's not permissible. Is it possible that it can be permissible? Yes, it is possible. How? Say medically the Islamic world is behind and there's no way of them being able to get a body to use. There is a possibility, because if we're going to fall behind in this field and it's going to be such a problem, there is a possibility where the marja' will say, I'm not saying they have said this, there is a possibility they say, because of this case, you're allowed but only for the moment, and then you bury the body. There is that possibility. Why? It becomes a secondary ruling. Likewise here, the maraja' have said, if you take a loan, they give you two conditions. Number one, they say do not make it a loan agreement. So when you're making an agreement, your intention is this, not a loan. Even though you know you're going to be paying back the capital and the interest. You know this. But if you make the intention that it is a loan and that you are agreeing to pay interest, then the transaction becomes forbidden. So this is something you got to know. People just go buy and they don't even ask. So the first one is that case. The second case where you can, and this is only with non-Muslim banks. The second case where you can make a transaction. I can make a transaction with an interest loan, and in this case, what they call istiqad haq, where you secure the money from the unbelieving, the non-believer bank. And then the hakim al-shara' permits for you to take that money. But then you're still forced to pay back the capital and the interest. Only in these two instances would it be allowed. So when I make a transaction in any way, buying and selling, I need to be wary of this. Trading with the same product is one of the biggest things people fall for, and that is usury. See, I can trade, for example, I can give you 4 eggs and you can give me a bucket of milk. That's allowed. But if it's the same item, I can't say, all right, say for example, I'll tell you, I'll give you 10 free-range eggs, and you say, all right, I'll give you 20 barn-laid eggs, for example. That's what? Riba. That's haram. They're both eggs there. So this is where it becomes not permissible. The second thing that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says to avoid is al-half. When we talk about half, what is it? Half is when you make a false oath. False oath could be with anything. There's so many places of false. False oath is where you tell them the turnaround time. Notice all the good companies. They'll tell you 6 to 8 weeks and they'll do it that weekend. That's why they're successful. They give you, they under promise and they over deliver. That's what makes them successful. Then you get the guy that tells you, tell him, listen, I want you to install my AC units and I want it before Christmas. And you say, well, no problem, it's done. And then you do it somewhere, next July when they don't need it. This is what happens. This is a false oath that you've made an agreement. Also, a false oath is when I give a false, I swear to God, I make an oath that is not true. For example, I remember when you go especially to the centers, the shops next to the shrines, you see this a lot. They tell them, is this material real? And they'll grab their beard and say, wallah, it's asli. And he actually means his beard that he's grasping. He doesn't actually mean the material. And he thinks, Allah says about them, يُخَادِعُونَ اللَّهَ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَمَا يَخْدَعُونَ إِلَّا أَنفُسَهُم وَمَا يَشْعُرُونَ. They think they mock Allah and the believers, but they don't trick and mock except themselves. They think they trick Allah and the believers, but they only trick themselves. وَمَا يَشْعُرُونَ. They do not feel what they are doing. I remember once something actually happened to me next to one of the shrines. I was in Karbala. I wanted to buy these little abayat, little ones. And I asked him about a certain material that was there. When you learn a word, you start using it all the time. I said, this must be the real material. And I said it to him, do you have this? And he said, yes, this is it. And I looked and I said, this is the same as the one I saw before. And I said, you certain it is? He goes, well, Hassan it is. He said this. So I was with one of the guys that comes to the Ja'fari. He had a place over there. And he said to him, احلف بالعباس. And the guy turned around and he said, swear by Abu Fadl Abbas. He turned around and looked. He goes, ما أقدر عندي جهال. He said, I can't, I have children. So in other words, this guy felt it's okay for me to give a false oath with Imam Hussein, but Abu Fadl Abbas is different. Either way, you don't make, because if you swear by someone's name, you're showing, that's how much I value. When someone will like, wahiyatu lady. Someone says, I swear by my kids. Why? Because they value their kids. So when they say, Wal Hussein, and they don't even have value for Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. The third thing that you cannot do in trade, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam says, kitman al-aib. Kitman al-aib is for you to conceal any deficiencies in your product. This happens a lot. When you conceal any deficiencies, I'll give you examples of concealing deficiencies. Is it permissible for you to trade in the dark? It's not permissible. This is a form of ghash. This is cheating. If you have a shop, the lighting, I've seen narrations, you read them. Imam al-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi goes up to a shopkeeper. Even when you're playing cricket, if the lighting is not good, they get the batsman to go back in the sheds. They can't see the fast ball. But see, these fast balls aren't bouncers at your head. They're balls that are balled at you from Nar Jahannam. At night, it gets dark. What happens? The Imam said, don't trade in the night. And he says, Man ghashana falaysa minna. Whoever tricks us or cheats us, he's not from us. So trading in the night is forbidden. That's why it's important. Even if you look at having a shop, what is one of the things people look at? Lighting. Because lighting says, Ahla wa sahla. Welcome. We're open for business. When it's dark, and you look at all the shady places, they're all dark. Everything that's haram is always dark. It's a shady business, it's dark. Could you imagine like you went to go see a clairvoyant and they walked in and there's lights everywhere? No, it's dark because evil's taking place. They want to talk. I'm about to tell you a million lies and you're going to believe me. Ahla wa sahla. So anyway, even another hadith, when we're talking about concealing the deficiencies of your product, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam meets a guy selling flour. There are bags of flour. The Prophet puts his hands inside the flour. Within the flour, he starts to feel moisture. He says, Ya hada, get the moisture and put it on top. So the person purchasing the product knows what's wrong with the product. Man ghashana fahuwa laysa minna. Whoever cheats us is not from us. This is another form of cheating. The fourth thing that I must avoid, that the Messenger of Allah says, Alhamda idha ba'. Okay? This is a massive problem. This is what people tend to call salesmanship. That's why no one trusts a used car salesman. He sold me a lemon. You've heard this. Even we use it as an example. I remember Roald Dahl, his children's book, Matilda, that Harry Wormwood, used car salesman, slimy guy. This is the way that they're perceived. Winding back the clock, all this stuff. They're known for that. You know what I mean? Giving you a car with retreads, all the stuff. They give you death traps. They sell you death traps. When you're selling something, say someone comes, some people are purchasing a car for you, they don't know. You can turn around and say, the car as is, go get a mechanic. And he says, no, I'm not going to look at it. That's his business. But if you say the car, have you seen people advertise? They say as is. You come and see it. You investigate. When they say as is, in other words, they're saying there's too many uyub for me to count. And everyone understands that. It's too many deficiencies. The car's blowing white smoke. That means the engine's running very smoothly. So they say, the car's blowing black smoke, or whatever it is. People come up with a thought of what it is. So if I'm sitting there praising what I have, this is a big problem that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam mentions in a hadith. How big is this problem? He says thalatha, but I'm only going to mention this because this has got to do with our discussion. He says thalathatun la yukallimuhum Allah wa la yuzakkihim. There are three that Allah la yukallimhum. Do you know what la yukallimhum? Allah doesn't speak to them. In other words, there's no mercy upon them. Wala yuzakkihim, He does not purify them for paradise. These people are out. These three, one of them He says, وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ, and they will have a painful chastisement or punishment. He says, الْمُزَكِّي سِلْعَةً بِالْكَذِبِ. What does that mean? Al-Muzakki sil'atahu bil-kadhib. The one that promotes the commodity that they're selling by lying. Where he says, this is the best product. You know, salesmen, people tell you, you can't live without this product. You can't do that. This is lying. Unless you probably, you know, if you got something that is the best product. You know, you're trying to sell someone an iPhone. Yeah, don't buy an Android. This is the best product you're going to have. Yeah, if you're going to promote something that's going to be better, yeah, by all means say it. But if you're promoting something that is terrible, you're promoting something that doesn't work, or you're promoting something that the person doesn't need, and you're pushing it onto them, then that, He says, Allah does not have mercy on them. The fifth thing that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, وَالذَّمَّ إِذَا اشْتَرَى. So when they sell, what do? They praise their product that they're selling. But when they're buying, what do? They do the opposite. They criticize the purchase. You know those people that turn up, they want to buy something off you, and they make you feel what? They make you feel like they're relieving you of the burden of owning this product. If that is the case, that's okay. So when you go onto, for example, Marketplace or Gumtree, and someone's got an item that's been up there for 11 weeks and no one's buying it, you're not lying. You're going to turn up and say, listen, mate, I know you got up there for $3,000. I'm going to give you $500. No one's going to buy it. You're not lying there. Do you understand what I mean? But if I walk into EB and I say, listen, I want this PS5 because if you don't sell it, no one's going to purchase this off you. This is what's haram. Because you're actually saying something that's not true. You're lying to them. Do you know what I'm saying? The whole thing that it's trying to explain is you have to be honest. In fact, a tajir sadiq, an honest merchant, enters paradise without a trial. If you're an honest merchant, you enter paradise without a trial. There's no trial for you. This is with our transactions that we have to understand for the dunya. Our transaction of dunya is what I need to understand. But the hereafter is different. See, the trade with the hereafter is different. Because the loss in the dunya is what? If I lose, I can go open another business. I can liquidate. You've heard this many times. Business didn't work, liquidate. I have a company, and then I have all these little branch companies that what do I do if they don't work out? That's it, bankrupt the company. No one gets affected. There's always a loophole in these, but when it comes to the trade with the hereafter, one is successful in the real meaning, and the other one is an utter failure. And this world is a marketplace. Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, in khutbah al-wasila, you probably have heard this khutbah a lot. How many of you probably have listened to it? You've put it in your car and you've listened to khutbah al-wasila. When he hears that man, bidhamm ad-dunya, the person that puts down the dunya, and then he mentions to him what the dunya is. One of the things he says, وَمَتْجَرُ أَوْلِيَاءِ اللَّهِ اكْتَسَبُوا فِيهَا الرَّحْمَةِ وَرَبِحُوا فِيهَا الْجَنَّةِ. That it's a matjar, meaning it's a marketplace, a place where there's tijara. Of who? The awliya of Allah. They acquire in it what? اكتسبوا فيها الرحمة. They get mercy in it. And وَرَبِحُوا فِيهَا الْجَنَّةِ. They profit from what? The dunya, paradise. This is your grounds for getting paradise. This is basically your qualifying lap that gets you into the position that you need to be in the hereafter. And those that are too preoccupied with this world for this world, and they live for this world, they will eventually die for this world and not the hereafter. But what is this ultimate success? What is this ultimate profit? What is this ultimate gain? Kids, what is this ultimate gain? The thing is, this world, you make a profit, $100, $1,000, $1 million. How long? Imagine right now, alaykum as-salam. Right now, any of you, I was to give someone $1 billion. The first thing you're going to think about is how long do I live? It's the first thing you're going to think about. I can only have this for this long. But the hereafter is different. The hereafter is eternity. There's no death in the hereafter. There's no age in the hereafter. There's no illness in the hereafter. In fact, Imam Mohammed al-Baqir, salawatullahi wa salamu alayh, says, Inna ahl al-jannah. This is the tijara we're talking about. The big transaction is the hereafter. Inna ahl al-jannah. The people of paradise. Yuhyawna fala yamutuna abada. That the people of paradise live eternally. La yamutuna abada. They do never ever die. And that is after ridwanun min Allah. After knowing that Allah is pleased with you. The second best thing in paradise is that. This is what kills you every day, knowing that you are mortal, knowing that I'm going to die. Paradise, you never die. This is the biggest thing that will enter your head. And this is the most important factor after ridwanullah in paradise. Imagine you have a short-term lease in paradise. Could you imagine that? Like you enter, they go, right, time's up, get out. You know how bad that is? Ask Adam. Nabi Adam alayhi salam. He will tell you what that. For 40 years he wept after being cast out of his short-term lease in paradise. It was that good that he lost it. It's eternity in paradise. وَيَسْتَيْقِظُونَ فَلَا يَنَامُونَ أَبَدًا. Eternal awareness. Never tired, you never need to sleep. وَيَسْتَغْنُونَ فَلَا يَفْتَقِرُونَ أَبَدًا. They're always needless in paradise. Never in need. In fact, Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, he says, Al-Faqr is what? He says, Al-Mawtul Akbar. Poverty is the greater death. Because death is once, poverty, you die many times a day. There's no poverty in paradise. Then he says, in this وَيَفْرَحُونَ فَلَا يَحْزَنُونَ أَبَدًا وَيَضْحَكُونَ فَلَا يَبْكُونَ أَبَدًا وَيُكْرَمُونَ فَلَا يُهَانُونَ أَبَدًا وَيَفْكَهُونَ وَلَا يُقَطِّبُونَ أَبَدًا وَيُحْبَرُونَ وَيُصَرُّونَ أَبَدًا. So in other words, if you go through all these, there's no more sadness, there's no more weeping, there's no more grieving, there's no more sorrow. It's eternal happiness. Imagine no more Fox News. Okay? Think about this. No more Zionist propaganda. Do you imagine that? Think about it. Imagine. No more Wahhabis. Do you imagine you're thinking about that? You know, no more you hear someone say Radiyallah after a name that you detest. You won't hear that anymore. There's no more of that. Everyone knows the deal. So you get there, yeah, we knew what happened. Did you get the news? Yeah. They didn't make it. So there's no more Radiyallahs when you're there. You won't hear those anymore. There's no more disinformation. There's no more disgrace. There's no more humiliation. There's no more believers being murdered and then being labeled as terrorists after they've been killed. There's no more spies that enter your countries and then get called researchers and philanthropists and get brought back safely. There's no more of that. You won't have to see it anymore. You won't have to see Peter Dutton's smug look anymore. You won't get to see any of that anymore. It's going to be so good. And not only that, وَيَأْكُلُونَ, he says, فَلَا يَجُوعُونَ أَبَدًا. You will never be hungry. وَيَرْوُونَ فَلَا يَظْمَؤُونَ أَبَدًا. You will never be thirsty. وَيَكْسُونَ فَلَا يَعْرُونَ أَبَدًا. You will never be without clothing. وَيَرْكَبُونَ وَيَتَزَاوَرُونَ. Everyone will have a ride, in other words. No one will be poor, and they'll visit each other. And then he says, salawatullah alayhi, وَيُسَلِّمُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْوِلْدَانُ الْمُخَلَّدُونَ أَبَدًا. That these servants around them will always be saying, good things and greetings to them. بأيديهم, in their hands. أباريق الفضة وآنية الذهب أبدا. Always they're at your service. Not you have to, when you're waiting for someone, can you get me something? And then they get caught up. No. These guys are on tap. Whenever you want them, they're there. And then he says, متكئين على سرر أبدا على الأرائك ينظرون أبدا. متكئين, you know what متكئين is? You're leaning on what? On your thrones. متكئين. متكئين, he says على الأرائك ينظرون أبدا. So متكئين على السرور. That they're leaning, and على الأرائك, they're on their thrones. What are they doing? They're viewing the view. They're looking at the view of what's around them. They're in awe of what they see. They're on a throne like a real boss. A real boss. They're in charge. It's their kingdom now. And then the Imam salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi says, تأتيهم التحية والتسليم من الله أبدا. They get the greeting from who? Wallah, you live in this world. You've seen people, they like to be recognized by a celebrity. Or no, could you imagine like they see them? They're happy people, honestly. Diego Maradona, who died recently. Once, this was when he won the Scudetto, the Italian champion in Serie A, he took off his boots. He threw the boot at the crowd. This guy grabbed the boot, kissed it, and then put it in his shirt and began to fight people off so they don't take the boot of Maradona. Or remember in Australia when Djokovic won the Australian Open and he threw his shirt and two people were fighting over the shirt of Djokovic. Djokovic as a child wouldn't have even imagined that was going to happen. The people are going to fight over his shirt. That we want to be recognized, that we see a celebrity, we get overcome. In paradise, none of these creations that go to the toilet and make a smell are saying hi to you, that are like you. Allah Azza wa Jal recognizes you in paradise. Allah gives you your tahiyyah. You're the celebrity in paradise, not someone else. And then the Imam says, Nas'alullah al-Jannah bi-rahmatih innahu ala kulli shay'in qadir. And have certainty that you that are here are in paradise. Don't doubt it. Why? Why are you in paradise? Have certainty you're in paradise. Be afraid that you get thrown out. But now as believers, no one that has wilayah for Muhammad and Ali Muhammad enters the fire of hell. I have no doubt in this. We have narrations that are clear with this. Imagine this. Imagine your whole life. Could you imagine? This is the justice of God. Your whole life, you're spat on because you love Ali ibn Abi Talib. Allah's going to let you be spat on the day of judgment. He's going to let all those nomos look down on you. However, they're the ones. They're in Jahannam. They can follow. They love Yazid. Allah yahshurhum ma Yazid. They love Muawiyah aydan. And the other three. Let him go down there. And you are with the ones who you love. Don't we, when we do dua on the Salat al-Mayyit, what do you say? Allahumma ahshurhum ahshurha ma man kana yatawalaw ma'a an-nabi wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Isn't that what we say? Isn't that who you want to be with? Isn't that who you love? You're there as long as you're on the path. When you fall off the wagon, God forbid, inshallah, Allah keeps you all on the righteous path. But I want to finish off with this. There's only this path to get you there. Belief in God and following this way. See, in this world, if you don't get a beachfront condo, you don't get a Ferrari, you don't get any wealth, what's the alternative? You get anything up to what? You might have a shack and your legs to walk on. Isn't that right? You might not get everything, but you're doing all right. You're still living. You've heard people be like, Aishin, we're living. Over there's no alternative to paradise. This is why you have to ask Allah never to cast you out of it. وَلَا تَسْتَبْدِلْ بِي غَيْرِي. Why? Because the alternative is the fire of hell. Amir al-Mu'mineen, salawatullah wa-salamu alayhi, she says, وَمَا شَرٌ بِشَرٍ بَعْدَهُ الْجَنَّةِ. There's nothing that's bad, there's nothing that's vice, or nothing that's evil if after it is paradise. It's all good, I'm going to heaven. Imam Hussein alayhi salam, the Arafah, what does he say? If I'm prevented this one thing, as long as I'm going to paradise, everything's okay. And I'm rewording what is actually meant in this, but that's what I'm saying. As long as I'm going to paradise, everything's good. Then he says, وَمَا خَيْرٌ بِخَيْرٍ بَعْدَهُ النَّارِ. There's no good, no, doesn't matter what you have in the dunya. Think of the best thing you can have in the dunya. Imagine you have Jeff Bezos' wealth. Okay? You have, think of the best looking actor. You have Nabi Yusuf's, for example, good looks and his charm. Okay? You got the strength of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Name everything. You got everything, the best of it. But right at the end, they tell you when it's all over, you go into the fire of hell. Is it worth it? It says, وَلَا خَيْرٌ وَمَا خَيْرٌ بِخَيْرٍ بَعْدَهُ النَّارِ وَكُلُّ نَعِيمٍ دُونَ الْجَنَّةِ مَحْقُورٍ. Every blessing without paradise is nothing. It's not even, and it doesn't even, you can't even equate it. Yes, sometimes we say, for example, we'll say the Rida al-Hindi, when he says in al-Qasida al-Kawthariyya, he says about Amir al-Mu'mineen, وَهَلْ بِالطَّوْتِ يُقَاسَ الضَّرْ. Can I compare a mountain to a speck? No, it's not even that. There's no comparison. I can't even put them in the same sentence if I don't attain paradise. Imam al-Qadhim, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, says it is a long sermon where he gives to Hisham ibn al-Hakam. He says, Ya Hisham, this and that and that. And then he says, أَمَا إِنَّ أَبْدَانَكُمْ لَيْسَ لَهَا ثَمَنٌ إِلَّا الْجَنَّةِ فَلَا تَبِيعُوهَا بِغَيْرِهَا. That there's no price for your body except paradise. That's what he says to Hisham. Do not exchange it for anything else. Don't sell for anything else. Don't go cheap. Sometimes we see people go, this guy sold for cheap. Remember that guy, I don't know if you've seen that video, where the guy that put the bomb in the market and killed all those civilians in Baghdad. And he was supposed to be a Shia by birth, was Makhasub ad-Din. When they bring him, he's killed all these innocent people. They said to him, you put that bomb, who gave you this bomb? He told them who they were. Some Wahhabis of some sort, probably Zionist linked or something. To put the bomb. Then he said, this is what they asked him, how much were you paid to do this? And this is, when you watch this video, you are shocked with the response. He says, waraq, which is $100. Waraq. He put in a bomb to kill all these people for $100. Some people, they exchange, imagine you exchange paradise for $1 trillion. That's like this person that did all that for $100. Same exchange. You've lost everything. I'll leave you with how do I go about entering paradise. What tijara do I do? Sorry, we've kept you here for so long. Allah tells you in the Quran, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who believe, you claim belief, listen. He says, هل أدلكم على تجارة تنجيكم من عذاب أليم. Someone said to you, I will teach you a trade, a transaction that will save you from a painful chastisement, will save you from hell. You say, I'm all ears. Tell me, I need to hear this. The first thing he says, تؤمنون بالله. Believe in Allah. Why? Because you're accepting what is true. When you believe in Allah, you accept what is true. You accept what is sound. You accept what is reasonable. You're not a moron that thinks there's a multiverse theory and this all just happened by chance because there was a right temperature and everything worked out. You're not a moron that thinks a child that's within a womb is not a life. You're going to fall, stop swinging. You're not a moron that sees everything with speculation and takes it as fact. You see facts, you see a creation, you know there's a creator. You see all the signs that are present around you and you believe in God. So you are a reasonable person, you are a sound person, you deserve to be in paradise. يُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. Why is it وَرَسُولِهِ? Why does Allah always, when He mentions, you know, Imam Ali ibn al-Hussein Zayn al-Abidin salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, in Dua Arafah for Imam Zayn al-Abidin, he says, وَقَرَنْتَ طَاعَتَكَ بِطَاعَتِهِ. That he says, I want to talk about who in this dua? He talks about the one who the obedience of is like no different to the obedience of Allah. You can't say, this is kufr. I'm telling you it's kufr. If you say that I obey God more than I obey Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi Muhammad wa Makruna. Your obedience to Allah is your obedience to Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. You are indebted to him. وَيَمِنُّ اللَّهُ عَلَيْنَا for this. Allah Azza wa Jal will let you know about this, that you are indebted to Rasulullah. That if Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam is not pleased with you, there is nothing that will make you enter paradise. Nothing at all. That I have to believe in Rasulullah. And if I don't believe in Rasulullah, I do not believe in Allah. End of story. This world, you can see without Rasulullah what it is. I mentioned abortions. I always mention this, the Sodomites and what they've done to the world. Everything that they've spread, it's got so bad that you get these celebrities that have come out and said, listen, we're going to have children. We're not going to raise them gender-based. We're going to wait till they're 18. They chose that there's an age, I don't know, there's an actual age where you can actually know your gender. At 18, let them discover themselves. You know, so the kid gets to 18 and says, listen, I'm a four-wheel drive. Like, seriously. At that age, but it's funny when we do a survey, there's always male and female. Have you noticed that? Have you ever seen like coronavirus? You know, because there's now over, I think it's about 47 genders, 48 genders, 60 genders. Have you ever seen where it says this many males, this many females, this many gender fluid, non-binary, two-spirit? That's my favourite one. Two-spirit. I've always wondered what that means. But I have all these genders. This world, this is without Rasulullah. This is a world without Rasulullah. A world without any guidance. This is what you're seeing today. Then he says, Allah Azza wa Jal, وَتُجَاهِدُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ بِأَمْوَالِكُمْ وَأَنفُسِكُمْ. وَتُجَاهِدُونَ. Notice the word jihad. I want to ask you a question, something to think about. Where in the Quran, how often you hear the word jihad, it's rarely ever associated with what? With fighting. Really. Because life is a fight. Life is a struggle. لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي كَبَدٍ. You have problems? We all have problems. Every single one of us. Life is hard. Life is difficult. But it's only difficult, Hajj Muhammad used to always say this, for the first 100 years. The first 100 years is difficult, after that it's easy. First 100 years is difficult. That's it. That's easy. You're finished. You've done your time. Strive in the way of Allah with yourself and your wealth. And the thing is, when you strive, Allah doesn't ask for everything. He asks for things, just little of your time, little of everything. Then he says, ذَلِكُمْ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. This is your golden ticket. This is what makes you enter. And this is better for you only if you know. Why? What is the result of doing this? What's the result of believing Allah? What's the result of believing Rasulullah? We said firstly it saves you from a horrible punishment, a painful punishment. And to strive in the way of your Lord with your wealth and yourself, what does he say? يَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ ذُنُوبَكُمْ. Yaghfir, Allah will cover up your mistakes. Allah will forgive your mistakes. Wallah, my dear brothers, if you go through the narrations of how many things you can do to get out, Even when I was reading, inshallah, Allah gives you all the opportunity to visit the shrine of Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida alayhi salam. In one of the narrations, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam says, from my children, there will come Ali and he will be buried in Tus. If you read the narration, he says, we will intercede for the ones that visit Ali ibn Musa Rida. وَإِن كَانَ مِنْ أَهْلِ الْكَبَائِرِ. Even if this person is of someone that does the greater sins. There's doors to return to God. Allah never closes the door. يَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ ذُنُوبَكُمْ وَيُدْخِلْكُمْ جَنَّاتٍ تَجْرِي مِنْ تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارِ. Allah will place you in paradise where the rivers flow from beneath the gardens. He says, وَمَسَاكِنَ طَيِّبَةً فِي جَنَّاتِ عَدْنٍ. There are good dwellings in gardens of what? Gardens of Adn. These perpetual gardens. This is what it means. And then he says, ذَلِكَ الْفَوْزُ الْعَظِيمُ. This is the mightiest achievement. This is the greatest success. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal, please forgive me for the length of the discussion. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal that no one leaves, not this center, no one of you and all those that are listening and all the believers that attend, especially the ones that partake in the Majlis of Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam. There's another narration for another time. All you people, that you don't leave this world with a speck of sin that you will be accounted for. That you enter paradise without a trial. ببركة الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. We ask Allah to hasten the reappearance of our master Al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan al-Mehdi. أرواحنا فداه. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم كن صلواتك عليه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وإلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات وإلى أرواح موتانا وموتاكم. رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة مع الصلوات.